I'm Josh, and I am one of the distillers at Porter's Gin. Porter's Gin just launched last December, but we actually have quite a long story behind the development of the gin before we came out. So I'm just going to tell you some of the interesting parts of the story, and then I will let you enjoy the rest of the evening and won't bore you too much with any details. And when you're leaving, you will also get one of our homemade speciality cocktails as well. So that'll be good. Okay, so this is our bottle, and the name of the talk today is called Porter's Gin and the Story of the Buddha's Hand. Buddha's hand is... Buddha's hand is one of the botanicals that we use, and it is sketched there on our bottle in homage to the botanical. So I'll go back a bit in our story. So a traditional copper pot still that you make gin in looks like this. We use this pot still to make a large amount of our gin, and this gin uses the botanicals that are most traditional, so the juniper, coriander, angelica, licorice and cinnamon, and we put these through the traditional pot still, and it creates a very traditional flavour on its own. But what we did a few years ago in our cocktail bar in Aberdeen was that we actually sourced some modern distillation equipment from Aberdeen University, from a professor called Andy Porter. And Andy Porter was a bioscience professor, or still is a bioscience professor, and he's also the name on the bottle. And he actually managed to get hold of some equipment that was secondhand from the university and put it together and make a distillation kit that we put in our underground lab at our cocktail bar called Orchid in Aberdeen. In the lab, that is where all the magic happens. That is where we distill the botanicals, create the recipes, make cocktails and make interesting ingredients and all of that. And our modern distillation equipment, the key thing about it is that we can change the temperature of the distillation. So it looks a bit like the next slide. It looks like this. It's called a rotary evaporator. And the rotary evaporator basically is very modern, made of glass. It has a vacuum pump so that you can reduce the pressure and reduce the temperature of the distillation at the same time. This basically means that you can distill botanicals without cooking them, without heating them up to a really high temperature. So just like when you're cooking, if you're cooking a tomato, it tastes different when it's fresh, and it tastes different when it's fried, and it tastes different when it's boiled. So it's the same when you're making gin. When we put our botanicals through the rotary evaporator, we keep the freshness of the botanicals like that. So that led us to basically experimenting with thousands of botanicals. We were going through basically lists of botanical suppliers. So we would just click, okay, we'll buy that one, buy that, buy that, buy that, from all over the world, and we got like hundreds of botanicals coming through the post, and stuff that you've never seen before, never tried before, and all kinds of stuff, all down to very daily things like heather in Scottish Highlands, or like grass outside, or pretty much anything you can think of. We put everything through the rotary evaporator at different temperatures, and we picked the ones that come out really fresh in the end to make the best recipe for Porter's Gin. This, by the way, is Andy Porter. He is the professor, and this is part of our botanical distillate library. So after we distilled each botanical in different temperatures, we kept them in the library, and we have like hundreds of little bottles of different botanicals, and they're actually, some of them are displayed in Orchid in the bar in Aberdeen. And that's what that is. One of the botanicals that we ended up using was called Buddha's Hand. And this really worked because what we wanted was to make a refreshing citrusy gin. We didn't want to make a gin that was so obscure that you had to, be like like the most extreme gin drinker to actually appreciate it. We wanted something to be house pour and in cocktails in the bar. So we wanted something that was nice, citrusy and refreshing, which is actually what makes gin good, we thought. And we came across the ideal botanical when we found the Buddha's hand, we thought anyway. The Buddha's hand is basically, has the peel of a lemon, it has fingers like a hand, and it only grows in temperatures that never go below 18 degrees. So that basically wipes out the entire UK. And also, it's not commercially available in Europe. So you can't go to the supermarket and buy it. There's no suppliers that supply it in large scales to anywhere. And the reason for that is that it's all pith. It's got peel on the outside and it's got pith all the way through and doesn't have any juice. So you can imagine your disappointment, you know, if you order it online or if you go into your local Waitrose and buy a Buddha's hand and then cut it open and it's pith all the way through. So nobody imports it and it's not really sold commercially in Europe at all. So what we did was, there's a nice close-up for you. What we did was we went to farmers in China where it grows naturally, where it comes from, and we got it imported in the way that we wanted it, because most Buddha's hand that is grown in China is used to make into powder and add to like Chinese medicine and herbal soup and all kinds of things. Either that or it's an ornamental plant that people put in their houses because it's nice and fragrant. So we wanted it in a nice, ripe, yellow form, but we needed it to be sliced and dried, not powdered, because then all the flavor disappears when it's made into a powder. So we had to actually get them to make that. And the Chinese suppliers were like, whoa, wait a minute, you're asking us for like really, really bad quality Buddha's hand. Because for their tradition, they like the green, non-ripe version of Buddha's hand for whatever reason. So we were actually asking for a large scale amount of basically bad quality Buddha's hand in terms of like what they consider it. But for us, we were just like, we wanted the ripest and freshest and like the one that had the best flavor for the gin. So we got that imported. This was an absolute nightmare. So what most gins do is that they import botanicals from a big supplier because they give a consistent supply of botanical that tastes the same every time, every year. Last year, we got 20 samples of Buddha's hand in, and each one tasted completely different. And so we were basically driving ourselves absolutely insane. We were like, let's just use an orange. Let's just put an orange in it. Let's not use the Buddha's hand. And then we had other distillers suggesting, why don't you just formulate some kind of essence that matches the flavor of the Buddha's hand, but isn't really Buddha's hand? So we thought about that and we thought, that sounds like a bit dodgy. That sounds a bit like artificial flavoring or something like that. And it's not really going to fly. And we wanted to actually make a London dry gin and distill a pure botanical. So we pushed forward. 6 months later, we found a supply of Buddha's hand that was good enough and worked and was a consistent kind of supply of it. And we got it imported in massive scale, like, for us anyway, 200 kilos of dried peel of Buddha's hand. And it's really light. So 200 kilos, like, fills up a large amount of space of this room. And we got it over on a container from China. And we thought, right, we're going to launch our gin soon. It's going to be here. It's going to be good. Great. But then what happened was nobody had really imported 200 kilos of a Buddha's hand into the UK before. And it was stuck in emergency lockdown in a port, I think it was in Portsmouth, because the only description that the Chinese supplier had put on it was dried Buddha's hand. And we couldn't figure out like which document was missing. They were like, well, we need this and this and this, and we've given all the documents. What do you need? They said it's still an emergency lockdown, which actually means that we're holding up the whole container, plus like everybody else's goods that are in the container as well. It wasn't stuck in customs; it was stuck on the port, like physically just stuck there because it had like some kind of dodgy ingredient in it. And then finally we told them, look, it's dried citrus peel. That's what's in it, dried citrus peel. And they were like, okay. And it got through like the next day. And we were thinking, you know, what did they think was in there? But so that created a bit of a nightmare for Porter's Gin. But it kind of gives us a bit of a unique angle in our story, we thought. So we're pushing forward with the Buddha's hand, and we're sticking to our guns, and we are going to keep importing the Buddha's hand as long as we keep making gin, pretty much. Basically, flavour-wise, Porter's Gin was a house London dry for the bar, so we wanted something really versatile in cocktails. And it turns out that it's really refreshing, citrusy, and it's quite mixable in like nice, long, drinkable drinks. And one of the reasons is the cold distillation keeps the freshness and keeps the original flavour of the Buddha's hand. And the other reason is the Buddha's hand just tastes really good as well. So that's our story. A couple of weeks ago, we won a gold award at the IWSC, which is the International Wines and Spirits Competition. It took us by surprise because we didn't even think it was worth entering, and then we just finally entered it, like on the deadline day, and then we won the gold. So it seems like, you know, people like the Buddha's hand, and I hope that you enjoy your G&Ts and enjoy your cocktail. And thanks very much for listening. Before you go, on your way out, you are going to pick up what we call a trader's highball. That's the name of the cocktail. It is like a unique cocktail because it's basically gin, coconut, and passion fruit topped up with tonic. But instead of using coconut syrup, passion fruit syrup, or whatever stuff, we actually have Porter's Gin that's been infused for 2 days in pure passion fruit and then strained, and Porter's Gin that was infused for a couple of days with coconut oil and then strained. So you basically have like a really subtle, interesting, like tropical G&T there. So enjoy and have a good night.